I've always been a skeptic. Ghost stories and supernatural tales were nothing more than entertainment for a lazy evening. That changed last summer when I moved into an old farmhouse in rural Maine. The place was a steal, probably because it was so far removed from civilization. The nearest neighbor was miles away and cell service was a joke. I loved the isolation, or so I thought. The first few nights were peaceful. The silence of the countryside was a stark contrast to the constant hum of the city I was used to. It was on the fourth night that things took a turn. I was jolted awake around 3 a.m. by a loud banging on the front door. My heart raced as I considered the possibilities. Out here, a visit in the middle of the night could only mean trouble. I grabbed the baseball bat I kept by the bed and crept downstairs. The banging continued, persistent and urgent. I peered through the peephole but saw nothing but the darkness of the night. The courage I had mustered drained instantly. "Who's there?" I called out, voice trembling. No answer. Just as I decided to turn away, the banging stopped abruptly. Silence engulfed the house once more. The next day I asked around, hoping one of the few locals I met could shed some light. Old man Jenkins, who ran the general store, went pale when I told him. He leaned in close and whispered, "Son, you're not the first to hear the midnight caller. That house of yours, it's been empty for years, not because of its location, but because of what resides within." He told me a tale of a young woman who lived in my house in the early 1900s. She was known to be a recluse, rarely seen by the townsfolk. One winter, she fell terribly ill. Too weak to seek help and with no phone to call for it, she succumbed to her illness alone. It was only in the spring that her body was discovered, seated by the front door, as if she had been waiting for a visitor to aid her. The locals believe her spirit never left the house. They say she still waits for someone to answer her desperate knocks for help, especially on cold, stormy nights when the barrier between the living and the dead is at its thinnest. I scoffed at the story at first, but every night, like clockwork, the banging would begin. 3 sharp knocks, always around 3 a.m. I tried ignoring it, but the fear it instilled in me was palpable. It reached a point where I couldn't stand another night in that house. I packed my bags and left before dawn, the sound of the knocking echoing in my ears as I drove away. Now when I hear stories of the supernatural, I no longer scoff. I remember the midnight caller and the cold dread that filled me each night. Whether it was the spirit of the young woman or not, something unnatural resided in that house. And I pray I never encounter it again.